All right. Audrey, you can kill that frame there and it'll just me and hopefully it'll be me and Priscilla. Okay, what I would recommend everyone do, first of all, is set it to speaker view and make sure you have your microphones off and turn your video off. That'll be just for the portion that we're going to do right now. I'd like to welcome special guest Priscilla McKinney. She is with Little Bird Marketing, and she's the Mama Bird CEO of Little Bird Marketing. And I was real impressed with seeing what you did over there at the Insights thing. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Priscilla.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Mark. This is really fun. And I do love the fireside chat with the actual fireside behind you. That's super
Yes.
nice. I'm a little cold in my office today, so that looks good. Yeah, so I'm the CEO and Mama Bird here at Little Bird Marketing. We are a content marketing agency. We create firm and sustainable lead generation systems. We do specialize in the market research industry. And so we know those guys, we know those gals, we love those nerds, and we love how they take data and make something from it. And we really look at the data of content and how that's actually driving sales. So we could be doing anything from writing a blog, an email, creating a video, doing webinars like this, or like you said, we actually put on Insights Marketing Day one time a year. So thanks for having me. I teach a lot of digital transformation. I teach a lot of people how to become influencers, especially on LinkedIn. So I'm happy to share my knowledge. I am an open book. You can ask me anything, Mark.
All right, awesome. Well, the idea of being a influencer, first of all, that's a big term. You know, when I think of it, I think of all these models and stuff on Instagram and Justin Bieber or whoever. So how does someone like us, how do we become influencers? What are the steps? How do we get there?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting to say who actually decides who's an influencer, right? I mean, I
Right.
hope that I do have influence over my children. I have influence over, gradations of going out of circles of influence that I have. But really, these kind of like global influencers that people, look at and in some ways maybe aspire to be. In some ways, I think they're a little bit distracting because I'm not sure that any of us really want to be that kind of an influencer. There are a few maybe who want to be that. But I think what's more important is to be very clear about the group in which you want to be an influencer. Maybe that group is 100 people, maybe it's 6,000 people, maybe it's 60,000, but beyond that, get really clear about what you mean by an influencer, right? So for me as a company of
Yeah.
15 people, I couldn't take 6,000 new clients on this year. So I don't want to be an influencer on 6,000 decisions this year, right? So we need to
Right.
kind of get our scope of what we mean by influencer, together before we actually go out on these channels and try and make it happen.
Yeah, so I mean that's I'm a big fan of things being defined properly, right? And so when I think about LinkedIn in particular, what are some things you're seeing there that are new that people need to know about in order to really sort of amplify their influence along LinkedIn specifically?
hmm Well, there are some new things on LinkedIn. The biggest new thing on LinkedIn is stories, and that's a great way to amplify what you're doing. It depends on like it. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. I always teach people, I don't care what you like. You need to tell me what your goals are, and you're going to have to do the thing that is going to help you achieve your goals. So, kind of, take the medicine and do what it is you are going to need to do. In terms of influence and what can be done on LinkedIn, it's also important to point out that becoming an influencer on LinkedIn is very different because it's a private network than becoming an influencer on Twitter, which is a public network. And
Hmm.
public, a lot of people don't think about that, but Twitter can be scraped by Google. Google can see everything you're doing there, right? So when people in the worldwide, global experience are looking for someone who is an influencer, if they're not connected with you on LinkedIn, they can't see all of what you are doing. And so you need to really be thinking about what that means for you as an influencer. Only the public side of it, Twitter, is where people kind of get the word influencer from in terms of how many people are seeing them in a particular industry influencing.
Okay, so well, I've seen a lot of people using like LinkedIn Live, all right? That versus like when you think about that versus Zoom or other or streaming other places. How does that work exactly?
Well, first of all, you have to actually be approved for LinkedIn Live. There was a process at one time, and so there was some work that people were doing, on that in order to get approved. And LinkedIn Live certainly is a great place in order to be working toward expanding your reach of your audience, because those LinkedIn Live things can be broadcast even though you're not connected to the person. Like I mentioned, kind of like that private network type of situation. And so LinkedIn Live is one of those things, but you can actually be doing a lot of other things that are like LinkedIn Live. There, I put videos out all the time through my posts. You could be using YouTube. You could be, there's tools and tricks are going to come up and fall and over and over again. My issue is always not getting so, hooked on what the newfangled thing is, but to go into LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever channel that you choose with your goals in mind. What do you need to achieve? And if one of those tools works for you, great, but don't get married to any one of those particular tools.
Interesting. So where do you start? You say start with goals, and what kind of goals would you set to be an influencer? And take me down the road. You have that goal. What do you do next? What do you do next?
Okay. Well, first of all, a lot of people don't even come in with a system about who they're going to connect with, right? So my first piece of advice is actually know who your ideal client persona is. Who are you trying to reach? Listen, people, you are not for everybody. You do not need to connect with everybody. That is just, it's just not true. And for salespeople, this is incredibly important to know your persona. But I would also argue that even for those who are not looking to sell directly on LinkedIn or any social media channel, it still is very important for them to understand who is their most ideal client in terms of their most ideal audience. So maybe they're just trying to expand their ability to be seen as a thought leader. Maybe they're not trying to get you to take money out of your pocket, but they do have still a very specific and best audience in mind. And that needs to get written down and codified. People are like, oh, I know it in my head. No, you don't. If it's in your head, let me assure you, you do not know it.
Write it down.
Write it down. It needs to be codified. And also, once you've written it down, don't go put it in a drawer. Put it out on your desk where you can reach it, because when you go to write something on a social media channel, then you need to be writing not from what you want to say in the talking head and the features and benefits and whatever else is on your mind. You need to be thinking about, how do I serve that most ideal client? Who's out there that I want them listening to me? So let me write something that is helpful to them, or that will resonate with them. And in order to do that, you have to have your persona written down.
So what is that? What do you have written down on yours? I'm just kind of curious.
I have several personas, but I'll give you just for example. I have one persona, my most clear persona, or most I spend the most amount of marketing money on this one persona. She's called C-Suite Stacy. And she does not own the company. I don't want to talk with the founder or the owner, right? Because they're too emotional. But I want to talk to the person who treats the company's money like their own. They love it that much, right? And they are very involved in the company's goals. They want to move the company forward. They have a really deep sense of a great work ethic, and they're looking for partners who can help them, because they also don't have a lot of ego in the game. They know when they don't know enough. And so they're looking for a very qualified partner. To me, that's the most amazing partner. And so I can look at that persona, and when I go to write something, I might say something like, are you just unsure what to do next and tired of the marketing chaos? Find a partner that listens to you. Right? Not talks at you, right? So I've done all of the psychographic work about this persona. And so I know how to speak to her and get her to be like, yeah, yes, let me talk to you.
So you're talking directly to that person's needs. So,
Yes.
So what kind of messages do you share, and how often?
Well, how often is an interesting question. So those are two different things. In LinkedIn, I give my general rule, and we don't have a lot of time, but I'll give a general rule. Post one time a day, because if you spend the time writing a post, it's worth nurturing it. And nurturing it means tagging other people, checking back up on it later in the day, maybe changing the people that you tag, writing back to the people who were kind enough to comment. So just a lot of stuff there. People too often go, okay, well, I'm going to send out 10 things. Why? Why send out 10 things? That's not really necessarily worth anything. So we don't want to post just to post. We want to do things that are quality. In Twitter, those tweets only last 3 minutes, so you're going to have to do a much higher volume there. So that the question of how often is one thing, but the question of what to post is, to me, one of the biggest areas where people don't understand what to do. It's about a certain cadence. And I have a rule that I made up and I've used for many years. It's called the rule of 15. For every 15 social media posts, I think you should do 10 that are interesting. Now, by interesting, I mean interesting to your most ideal client. But they can be sourced from somewhere else, that you don't have the burden of creating it, right? So go find things that you think you can curate that would serve them and that would be interesting, right? So 10 things that are interesting. Then you write or source 4 things that show that you're interested. And what I mean by that is they're overtly helpful. 3 tips to do this, how to vet a partner, like what kinds of things does this ideal client need? Just get obvious with them. So give them 4 things that show that you're interested in them and their problems. And for that 10 and that 4, you earn the right one time to ask for the business and you get the chance to sell. And the 2 things I hear all the time from people about social media is, I don't want to get on there because I don't want to be sales and slimy, or I don't know what to write. And I say, if you don't want to be sales and slimy, then don't be salesy and slimy. That's the end of that story. And if you don't know what to write, look at that cadence and understand you don't have to be the originator of writing everything that you write. You just need to be a good curator.
So curating, finding other articles that are relevant to your audience, sharing them, tagging them, making them your own. Do you have a difference for your company website or your company or brand on LinkedIn? And do you run any kind of groups on LinkedIn?
I don't run groups, and it's interesting because I've been a LinkedIn influencer for many years. And at the very beginning, groups were really going gangbusters, right? Now, I will say groups also take a lot of loving care, right? They don't just by themselves become wonderful and dynamic. So if you have the time to invest, I think it is a very good place to invest. But groups really, the most lasting benefit, in my opinion, is that if you do join specific groups, then you automatically become a second connection to anyone else in the group. And that can be an incredibly helpful way to expand your reach. And I try and remind people about this all the time. You're not collecting connections for the sake of collecting connections, right? But you're also have the other side of it where people sometimes turn down people. I'm never going to do business with them. But you're not necessarily trying to sell to your network. You're trying to sell through your network. So getting a very large reach and developing a very strong network and growing those connections is very important, even if you will never do business directly with the person who just asked to be connected with you.
It's interesting because I've seen the groups also morph quite a bit, since LinkedIn came around, and used to be able to send messages to them in the past. Now you can sort of highlight or highlight one of the things, and it gets sent out once a week. You can do that to a group. It's just kind of an outreach thing. Do you have any other tips or things, you could say, wow, this would really save you a ton of money and time if you just do this one thing?
Yeah, I definitely think my biggest, I guess the thing I like to talk about most is treating social media like it's a cocktail party. So do behaviors that you would do at a cocktail party. It's very good manners, right? Well, one of those things is that you don't walk into a cocktail party and shout at people. Come over here and talk with me here. No, you walk over to people. So to me, one of the biggest things that people could learn is how to walk across the proverbial room out online. Because instead of being trapped in LinkedIn mail jail, or instead of just being a talking head and just talking and wondering why people don't come to your feed and talk to you there and demanding that they do come there. Instead, stop for a minute, walk across the proverbial room. If you have someone you want to do business with, or you want to serve, or you want to connect with, or you just want to be friends with, you respect them as a colleague, walk across the proverbial room, meaning go to their profile, go
Mhm.
to their feed and start a conversation there. Mark, you posted something about today, and instead of me taking that information and putting it through my feed, I just started a bigger conversation on your feed, and I got you a lot of traction on your post by inviting some of my colleagues and my clients to that and saying, hey, this is so interesting what Mark's doing. I think you might benefit from the other weeks. And so sometimes it's about actually just not shouting at people and demanding that they come to you, but going where the conversation is already happening and just adding to it.
It's interesting. We got some questions here from the audience, and if you do have any specific questions, just drop them in the chat. We have two right now from Jeff, and it tags on what you were just talking about, which has to do with tags. So, are there any best practices around tagging people in posts? Any kind of ID keywords, that you're not using? Is there a limit to the number of people you tag? Do you tag 5,000 people? What do you do? How do you do it?
Yeah. Well, I love tagging people, but I will say there are some real rules. First of all, if you tag too many people, LinkedIn absolutely algorithm, I don't know what the number is, but it will shut you down. It will not share your post if you tag too many people. The
Mhm.
beautiful thing is if you tag a few people, the idea is it amplifies your reach because they get tagged, it falls into their notifications and it's in their feed. And so therefore their followers but have the potential of seeing that post as well. So it's a really good way to actually go about it amplifying your message. But as with all things, as soon as it becomes a tactic and people overuse it, it's done and it's overplayed. What
So
I
what's the number? Is there an ideal number?
LinkedIn won't disclose that, but I would say I don't tag more than 10 people in something. And the other piece I would say is you have to go about like developing a group of what I would call friendlies in your social media, people that that you talk with, you amplify their voice. It's just a give and take, but you've got
Mhm.
to give. You just have to give. And the other thing I would say is that if you're wondering, should I actually, tag this person? My biggest way to know if you should do it or not about just etiquette is, would you find it strange if that person were knocking on your door? If it is, maybe you shouldn't tag them. Like, right? You don't want it to be like, what? Who's that? Like, I don't even know that person. That's
Right,
weird.
mystery tags.
Exactly. That's just,
Yeah.
and that eventually that just falls down and it will hurt your reputation and you'll end up getting blocked.
Mhm. Another question we have here is LinkedIn Stories. What is that exactly? Is that a LinkedIn capability, a new capability or something, or is it?
Yeah, it is. It's not on desktop, so you'd need to be on your phone. So people who usually ask me that, I happen to be a very diehard desktop user of LinkedIn. So it's not stories isn't something I see all the time, but it is a feature on your phone. And just like they just basically took the whole idea from Instagram. So just like Instagram stories where you can show more up to the minute. And I think it's breaching the difference between LinkedIn being kind of a longer drawn out story format, where
Mhm.
Twitter is like right the second what happened 3 minutes ago. And so LinkedIn Stories is trying to kind of breach well, this is what I'm doing right now, and giving kind of a little bit more of a human interest angle to LinkedIn. But if you go to your phone, you can see right at the top, you'll see the new spacing, and you can actually press the plus. And just like you can just Google, how would I create a LinkedIn story? Super easy, but it's just a collage of different pictures and you can tell a story of what you're doing right now. But they are really in the minute. These things are not things that are going to be nurtured all week long as a post.
Interesting. I like to always share with, they give you an option of who you can share your post with, right?
Mhm.
And you can share it to a group or everyone, or I like to share it to everyone and Twitter.
Mhm.
Is that something you advise doing, or should you craft your own messages over there?
In general, I'd say when you're crafting a written message, I would say that you need to craft it differently for Twitter and for all the different channels. But in
Mhm.
terms of stories, it's very visual. And I don't think that needs further translation.
Okay, awesome. Well, hey, thank you very, very much. Audrey, we're going to be playing that reel in just a second. So what we're going to do here in just a minute, folks, is we're gonna go to the networking portion after we have the closing video. And for everyone watching the recording, there's a bunch of people here. We're all going to go into rooms and network with each other and get to meet each other. So I'm going to give you some instructions on that after we do the close. And then we're going to have 2 rounds of 20 minutes each with between 4 and 5 people in each room. So Audrey, let's go ahead and play that closing reel and we'll stop the recording. Okay, super. I'm going to stop the recording now.